Hi guys, welcome back to Flower Class with Helen and Olivia. My name is Madison and I'm going to be teaching today's workshop. We have a very fun class planned. This is a fundraiser workshop, so all the proceeds from this class will go to Everytown. So exciting class to be involved in. We have a very beautiful bucket full of all orange product. Lots of these beautiful seasonal flowers that we are going to use to make a monochromatic arrangement, which will be all in this single color. Earlier today, we delivered to you guys a bucket of beautiful flowers. You also received a bag inside which you'll find this ceramic vase. If you haven't already done so, you're going to want to go ahead and fill it with just lukewarm tap water is absolutely fine. You also will have a piece of chicken wire. So that looks like this. We are going to use that pretty early on, so just make sure that it's handy. And then finally, you'll have a copy of your flower formula. So this just names all the different individual flowers that are going into this arrangement, so you can keep track of the names of things as we're adding stuff in. So once you got your base filled, we're gonna go ahead and start with our chicken wire. I'm holding mine horizontally, like so. And I'm going to fold my top to bottom, and then I'm going to fold it in half again. And in doing so, I just kind of made a ball shape that I'm then going to slide into my base. I like to just go ahead and push down on the top of the wire so that it is flush with the baseline. And then you can use your thumbs to just spread out any big clumps of wire. So if there's been a lot of wire that's forced to one side of the base, you can go ahead and just use your thumbs to spread it out a bit. And that will help to keep everything nice and open. So the reason why we use this chicken wire, it creates some structure in our base. It's going to keep things from moving around a bunch. It will keep things from falling out of your base, and it's going to allow you to be a lot more intentional with where you're placing your stems and the actual design itself. So if we look at it from above, you'll see there's lots of like little slots and nooks and crannies where we can go ahead and add our stems, and then the wire itself is going to support the flowers and keep them from moving a ton in the base. You don't need to concentrate on this grid at all, so just ignore it. It's going to do its job entirely on its own. Just pretend like it's not there. All right, so the first thing we're going to pull out of our bucket is our greenery. Today we're using a beautiful bush ivy, so it's this beautiful shiny green foliage. You may have multiple pieces. So just go ahead and root through your base and make sure that you get all of those greens out. I absolutely love bush ivy. It has this beautiful kind of nice cascade to it. It also has really full, large leaves. So you get a lot of density and nice lush fullness to the base of your arrangement. So we're going to begin to use this greenery to help fill things out. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to break off any either really separated off pieces. So in this case, I have this big bottom chunk that's separated from the rest of my piece. I'm gonna go ahead and just break that off. I can use this as a piece. And then I can break off any big arms. So if your piece has like a long arm coming out of the side, you can break that off as well. And we're just trying to get it into smaller, more manageable pieces. So for me, all of these leaves are kind of clustered together. So I'm just gonna leave them as one. I broke off this small arm, and then this last little piece that I had left in my bucket is just a small collected stem like so. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my palm and kind of measure the amount of greenery on my stem. I like to leave like a palm's worth of greens on. So in this case, I'm going to just strip away any leaves that are kind of below that loose measurement. I do recognize that we all have slightly different size palms, but generally speaking, that'll get you a nice full piece that's not too big for this size space. And then I can do the same for any other pieces that I have. About this guy, where all of mine are kind of collected at the top, right around that same hand measurement, although I may pull off a few leaves below that. And then my final piece, I'm going to do the same as the first two. So what we've got is just clean stems with a plume of foliage on top. I've got 3 kind of decently sized pieces. I'm going to go ahead with my first piece and just work them in around the outside of my base. So I'm going to hold my stem right where the leaves end, so right about so, and I'm going to hold that right against the edge of my vase. So just pinching on the bottom of where my leaves end, I'm going to hold that right against where the edge of my vase is, and then using whatever tool we're using in class today. I'm using a knife, but you can also use clippers. We're just going to cut the stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. So we're going to use the same technique all throughout class to measure our stems, and that will be the same will be true for our flowers. So I will demonstrate for the first probably 5 or 6 stems, and then we'll kind of just use that same measurement throughout. So I went ahead and threaded my first piece of greenery into my vase. So you'll notice I'm going in at quite a bit of an angle. That's going to make sure that my greens are kind of like resting on the edge of my vase like so. And then I'm going to do the same with my next piece of greenery. I'm going to concentrate on getting that over onto this side of my vase, so just the opposite side. Same as before, just pinching at the base of where those leaves end, holding that up against the edge of my vase, and then I can cut my stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom. And then I threaded that guy in too, so he's resting around the edge of my vase. And then for my last and final piece, also if you have additional pieces more than what I have, feel free to just put them on the edge of your vase as well, but we do want to get one piece that's kind of up top in our arrangement. So as far as deciding how tall we want our arrangement to be, generally speaking, you want the actual floral part of your design to be equal to the size of your vase. So it'll be half flowers, half vase. So I like to use my thumb and pinky finger and just measure my vase, and then take that measurement and put it on top of my vase. And this is about how tall I want to keep my design so that it is scaled appropriately to the vase itself. Any bigger, you will end up getting really aggressively large for this small vase. And then anything smaller, you'll find that your vase kind of overwhelms the actual design itself. So I'm just going to take my stem and just like before, pinching at the base of where my leaves end, and I'm going to hold my stem up to the height here. So in front of my vase, you can see I'm just holding it up to that height, and then I can snip my stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. And then this guy, rather than going in at an angle, I'm just going to kind of get him high up in my design. Just pop him in like so. And it doesn't look like much right now, but as we start to fill things out a little bit more, you'll see that things shape up pretty quickly. We've just got a nice little collar of greens around the base, and then some greenery that's going to be kind of peeking out in the top amongst the rest of our actual flowers. So speaking of flowers, the next thing that we're going to pull out of our bucket is our mini green hydrangea. You should have 4 of them in your bucket. They look like this. So it is a flower that has the little protective baggie on it. These help to protect the integrity of the flower as they're traveling to us. So we like to leave them on until we put them into the design itself. I'm going to begin by just removing these bags, and I like to do it by pulling down on the bag. That way you'll have a little bit less actual breakage of the stem. Sometimes I will pull from the top and then end up beheading my bloom. So best to pull from the bottom. We'll release the bloom. You'll see that this is a beautiful pop of citrus colored green, which is going to marry really well with all of the orange tones that we are using. These are essentially baby full-size hydrangea. So the farmers cut them early when they were nice and petite and young on the bush. They have a really lovely color at this stage of life. They also, when they're really young and they're not quite as bloomed out, they have a longer base life, so they'll last a little bit longer. And they're a really good size for many different sizes of design. So I love the look of hydrangea leaves, so long as the coloring is still nice on them, and so long as they frame the face of the flower out. So I'm going to take a look at my bloom itself. If the leaves are kind of framing out the face of the flower, I'm going to leave them on. Anything else below that, I'm just going to strip away. And then I can take a second look at my bloom and say, is there any leaves that maybe have any obvious tears in them, any like really intense browning on them, and then I can remove those as well. So I'm going to do the same for all 4 of my mini green hydrangea. So just first taking a look at whatever doesn't frame the face of the flower out, I will remove, and then anything that may be discolored, I will remove as well. I really like the hydrangea leaves because I think they help to give your arrangement dimension. They will typically stretch out beyond the like face of the flower, so it just kind of helps to break things up a little bit. It will keep your arrangement from looking too like spherical at the end. All right, so we have four of these guys, and I'm gonna just kind of evenly space them around the outside of my design, kind of like a nice little collar. So I'm gonna take my first hydrangea bloom, going to hold it with my fingers at the base of the bloom itself. I'm gonna hold it up against the edge of my vase, so just kind of right about so. And then I'm going to use my clippers to cut the stem where it looks like it hits the bottom of the vase. And then again, we're gonna go in at a bit of an angle because we do want these mini greens to kind of rest right on the edge of the vase. So I've got bloom number 1 in, I'm gonna do 2, 3, and 4, evenly spaced, although it does not need to be perfect. So bloom number 2, I'm gonna hold him up right about here. And then I'm going to cut the stem where it looks like it's hitting the bottom of the vase. And then I'll get this guy in, again, going at an angle so that the bloom itself kind of rests right at the edge there. 1, 2, and then we'll get 3 and 4 over here, using that same technique. All right, and then our last and final one, I'm going to get into this last little pocket over here. There we go. All right, so still doesn't look like quite much of anything now, but we're going to start to add in some of our colored or different colored flowers. So we're using kind of the full spectrum of oranges here. We've got some pumpkin colors, some apricot colors, corals, some hot pinks. So lots of fun stuff. We also are focusing on some different seasonal things. So our marigolds are definitely in season right now. Locally, our celosia, so the one that looks like kind of like a furry brain, is in season as well. It's also called coxcomb, so you may see it referred to as that on your formula sheet. We have our asclepias, which is this guy here, nice and like dainty little flower that is also in season. And then a couple different styles and varieties of roses that we are going to add into this design. So then the important thing when you are working in a monochromatic color palette, so when we are focusing on kind of one wedge of the color wheel, it's nice to have multiple shades within that single color. That will help to give you some dimension in your design. It's going to help to keep it looking more complex, and is again going to give you some dimension. So important that if you decide that you would like to work within a single color, that you do kind of get some variety in there to help to break things up and keep things looking really interesting. So the first flower that I'm going to have us pull out is our one of our roses. They are called a free spirit rose. So they look sort of similar to one of our other roses, but you'll see there's a pretty clear distinction between the two. So this is my free spirit. It's orange, and then the outside of it has more of like a pinky hue to it. And then we've got this guy next, which is our garden rose. You'll see it's a little bit tighter. It is just a single colored rose, so it's just a plain coral. It's not picking up perfectly in this video, kind of the difference in color, but the shape of these leaves are more cabbage-like. So really tight, compact leaves that are all kind of folded amongst each other, versus our free spirit, which has kind of that spherical traditional rose shape that you are likely familiar with. So we're going to start with this one, so the orangey pink guy, and then we're going to leave the single colored coral ones behind, and we'll use those next. So we're going to pull out all of our free spirits. There's a nice little variety within the free spirits as well. So you'll see that some of them may be like a lighter color orange, versus you may have some that are even reading like this really, really, really deep, rich orange color. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to remove the leaves off of our stems. So whenever possible, we want to make sure that all of our stems are cleaned of leaves before putting them into our vase. That's going to make sure that we don't have a bunch of bacteria in our vase as these flowers are starting to kind of go through their life and they're breaking down a bit as they sit in water. Removing the leaves is going to make sure that our water stays a little bit cleaner, and that will eventually mean that our flowers last a little longer as well. I'm having a lot of the case of the dropsies today. So we've got all of our leaves removed, and the next thing that we're going to do is just remove our guard petals. So your guard petals are those petals around the outside of the bloom that tend to show some damage on them. They're the petals that are protecting the bloom as it's developing. So when it's a little bud on the bush, these outside petals are protecting it from wear and tear. So we're going to go ahead and just begin by removing probably 4 to 5 petals around the outside that may have damage. With our free spirits, the majority of that darker coloring tends to be on the outside of the rose. So I try to be really picky when I'm removing guard petals and really only remove things that are super unsightly to look at. And then I'll usually leave on as many as I can because some of that dual colored hot pink tone is introduced on those outside petals. So I'm doing the same for each of my roses, just removing 3 to 5 petals. If you can get away with removing no petals, that's fantastic as well. But I do want to remove anything that might be like obviously damaged. And then what we're left with are these perfect roses. So when you buy roses from the grocery store, someone has already removed those guard petals. It's really rare that a flower can get to full maturity without having guard petals, but if you are maybe in a greenhouse or you're in a really controlled environment, there is definitely certain gardens that will produce perfect roses kind of right on its own. So when I remove my guard petals, it will take away some of the fullness of your rose. So the next thing I'm going to do is just blow on each of my blooms. That will just kind of help to accelerate the rose opening just a bit, so you'll gain that fullness back, and they'll be nice and full and beautiful and perfect looking. All right, so we've got 6 of these guys, so I'm going to break them up into groups of 2. So they'll be in 3 groups of 2, and I'm going to spread those groupings around the outside of my design. So the goal here is that we're all sitting around this arrangement at a round table, that all sides of the arrangement look really nice and beautiful, and you'll get to take in a little bit of each type of flower no matter where you're sitting. So that is why we're breaking these up into smaller groups. I'm going to begin with my first grouping of 2. For my first grouping, I am going to do some roses high and some low, so that if we're standing near this arrangement or if we're sitting near this arrangement, it's going to look good from multiple vantage points. So my first grouping, I'm going to do a little bit high in my design. So that top piece of greenery we used to kind of measure out the height of our design, I can use that as I'm cutting my first rose. So I can hold my rose up to that height about, and then I can cut my stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. And then I'm going to slide this first guy in. Rather than going straight into the center of my design like a bullseye, I am going to just cock it off to whatever side is more open. So whatever side has more open space, we can cock that guy off to. And then I'm going to get my second rose kind of a little bit below that first one. So I can pull it up a little bit below that first one, give it a nice cut, and then I can nestle this guy in, kind of like a little trio or duo right there. So I've got some over here, and now I want to give some love to this side of my design. So I'll do a second grouping kind of right over here. So we're just going to evenly space our next 2 groupings. For this first one in this grouping, I'm going to start about halfway down the design. So about halfway down like so. And give that guy a nice cut, and then nestle him in here. And then the second one in that grouping, I'm going to do below the first. So nestling this guy in right about so. So my first grouping is on this side, it's a little bit higher. Moving over, I've got a second grouping that's a little bit lower, and then I've got this whole back side of my design that doesn't have much color going for it right now. So you have the option. I have this big expanse over here where there isn't any color. So you could do another grouping of 2, but just to break this up a little bit more, I'm gonna do one over here and then one over here. So just spreading this color a little bit more. Pop my next 2 roses in. So now as I spin my design, I'm seeing that orange color on all sides. All right, next up we're going to work with that second variety of rose I talked about earlier. These guys are called a coral expression. So they look like this. Again, beautiful cabbage-like shape to them. That is indicative of them being a garden rose. So they just are a little bit more complex. They will open up with some more fullness than your traditional style roses. They oftentimes will have a beautiful scent to them, although these ones don't really smell particularly, they don't really have much of a scent at all. But oftentimes, generally speaking, your garden roses will have more petals, a different pattern to the way the petals grow, and then they will generally have some scent, whether it be subtle or very aromatic. All right, so same as with our traditional roses, we are going to begin by just removing any leaves, and then following that up with removing any guard petals. My coral expressions are a little bit more pristine than my free spirit, so I'm only gonna pull off as many rose petals as I need to, and then you can do the same as before, just giving your bloom a puff of air just to open it up a little bit. So we've got 3 of these guys. I'm going to spread them, sprinkle them out throughout the design as well. Our first one, we're going to do kind of a pie. So I've got my high grouping of free spirits on this side. So I'm going to get my high pink coral expression over on this side to fill this side of the top of the design out a little bit. So you'll see I'm holding my rose right about so. You can give that guy a nice cut, and then I can nestle him in somewhere up top of my design. As I turn my piece, I have a couple big cavities in my design, one of which is right here, and the second one, this area is just kind of boring and a little bit darker. So I'm going to use my next 2 roses to fill out any big holes that I have. So for me, again, that's here and kind of a little bit lower over here. That may be slightly different in your design. So my recommendation would be to plug in any big holes first, if you have any huge holes, and then to take a look and see, is there anywhere in my piece where I have just less interest, less color, anywhere that looks like it's been neglected thus far. We don't have a ton in this arrangement so far, so I suspect there's a lot of areas that look like that. But the idea is that we just kind of want to spread them on different sides of the design. So first looking for holes, and then maybe looking for places where you have less to look at. All right, so we've got our roses in, and now we're going to pop in our spray roses. So today we're using an orange crush, I believe, spray rose. Sorry, orange babe is this variety. So they are essentially just lots of teeny tiny little full-size roses that are on a single stem. So we'll treat them the same way, removing any leaves, and then taking a look to see if there's any guard petals. These look so perfect. I don't see really much of any guard petals on my individual blooms, but should you spot 1 or 2, go ahead and just pop those off. All right, and we will use these to again plug in any big holes. So for me, I've got a big hole up top. So my first one I'm going to use to fill in any holes you have up top in your design. For me, that happens to be on this side of my design. And because there's lots of little blooms on this single stem, you'll see it creates some they're really great for kind of breaking up areas where maybe you have a lot of open space. So I've got one up here high, and now I'm going to look for a hole somewhere that's a little bit lower. So for me, I've got a hole back here on the back side of my design, and I'm going to use that to plug in this hole. So a little bit lower. And then our last one will be a designer's choice. So just take a look at your piece. Is there anywhere where you feel like you could use a little bit of love? For me, I went 1, 2, and now I'm gonna put one in over on this side of my design. But you can't really screw this part up because we're working within a single color family. It's really hard to mess this up just because all of the colors really meld beautifully together. All right, next we're going to pull out our protea. So this is a really fun flower. It is considered to be a tropical flower. So this is a pincushion protea. Very interesting kind of alien-esque flower on its own. It looks a little bit bizarre, but once you kind of nestle it into a design, it really just camouflages so beautifully. And it adds some really nice texture to your arrangement. So we've only got one of these. So my suggestion for this bloom is to find somewhere up top where you feel like it would have a focal location. So for me, I've got a nice little open U shape on the back end. So I'm just going to use this to kind of fill in a little bit of that hole. And I'm just going to thread him into the top of my design. And it'll almost be like a little top hat, just kind of cocked off to one side. But somewhere up top where he is going to be seen. Whenever you're working in instances where you just have one of something, it's nice to kind of have really prime real estate wherever that might be on your design, so that it doesn't just kind of get lost around the base here. So another single bloom that we have is our celosia. So this is another one that on its own can look very bizarre, but it is kind of called celosia or also called coxcomb. Both of them are kind of their common names. This one has a really beautiful velvety texture to it. So anything that you can introduce into your design, for instance, the pincushion protea or the celosia that has a different texture, is going to add some nice complexity to a design that is all one color. So you can work within single shades, but you can also work with different textures, and that's going to keep things looking really dynamic and interesting looking. So we've only got one of these as well, so I am going to put him up top somewhere too. So this one in our design, all of us are going to starting to look a little bit different. So where I'm placing mine may be different than where you're placing yours, but the idea is to just get somewhere up top where it's not going to get lost amongst the rest of the flowers. Cut just a little bit too long. And just try to be as patient as possible as you're threading your stems in. Once you get more into the arrangement, it gets harder and harder each stem to kind of add stuff in. But that means that you're gonna have like a really full, dense arrangement in the end, which looks really beautiful. All right, next up, let's go for our marigold. So our marigold is one of those flowers that has a really unique smell to it. I actually love the smell. I think it's kind of like a controversial smell. Sometimes people love it. Sometimes people think it's like a little bit too fragrant. I think it's just really, I don't know if there's like a nostalgic quality of it, but I just really love the smell of these. They're just an interesting smell. So for these guys, I'm going to just break off the bloom itself. So in this case, I have two kind of blooms on a single stalk. I'm just going to break them off, and then we can use them in 3 different places in our design. I'm going to begin by just clearing away any of the foliage that's on the stem. So any green bits we will remove. And then for these guys, I'm just going to go ahead and pop them in, again, anywhere where I have holes. So with the marigolds, you'll notice that it has a really nice kind of thicker stem that is really hardy. So I can put it at a bunch of different angles and you'll see that it's not flopping over, it's staying upright. So what that means is that you can let your marigolds drift a little bit farther out of your design if you like the look of that. If you would prefer to have everything a little bit more lush and dense, certainly feel free to kind of snuggle your marigolds in. But if you like something that has like a little bit more airiness to it, something that's a little bit more organic, feel free to let these balloons kind of drift out a little bit from the rest of your design, which is what I'm going to do. Because again, we're working in all-in-one color, I like the idea of anything that will kind of give me some nice dimension or interest. So for my marigolds, I am going to leave mine just a little bit farther out of the design, but I'm using them at 3 different places. I've got one over here, I popped one in right around here, and then my next one I'm going to get them a little bit lower on this side. Now I'm going to let mine drift just a little bit farther out. There we go. Beautiful. All right, so our next bloom is our Asclepias. It is honestly lots of little star-shaped blooms all kind of clustered together. This is another one that will look really beautiful if you want to let it kind of drift out of your design. Although again, feel free to, if you prefer more of a tailored look, to leave it a little bit more snuggled in. We have 2 of these guys, so when you're looking for placement, my recommendation is to do one high and then one a little bit lower. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and do one high kind of coming out of the top of my design over here. So I'm going to snuggle this guy in here. And then my next one, I'm going to go ahead and get in on the opposite side of my design, but a little bit lower. So for me, that means threading him in closer to the base of the design, right around there. Beautiful. All right. All right, so moving our way through the bucket, we have one final flower left, and then one final type of greenery. So our last final, final flower, I think, is one of my favorites in this bucket. These are our ranunculus. So they are exceptionally large in this particular bunch of them. I'm just removing any leaves as I speak to you guys about them. They have this beautiful kind of teacup shape to them, a lovely brown center, and then lots of beautiful buds. So in the case that my bud is kind of growing really nicely alongside my full-size bloom, I'll leave those 2 together. It looks really nice to see a bud growing along a full-size bloom because that would be how it grows in nature. If you have additional buds that are a little bit more low-lying, you can just pull them off and use them separately. Sometimes I would say you don't have to use your blooms, but in this case, because the actual full-size flower is so big, the buds are actually pretty big as well. So totally take advantage of that, and I would say definitely pop any buds in as well. So we've got 3 of these guys. So my first one, I'm definitely going to make sure that I have one up top in my design. So for me, I've got one last little open area on the back side up top. I'm going to pop my ranunculus in there. Same is true for these guys. They have a really nice thick stem, so I can get away with letting them drift out of my design if I would like. So I've got one on this side. I'm going to work on getting one kind of over on this side over here. And for me, I'm going to let him kind of drift outside of the rest of my design. If you have a bud, you can certainly use it alongside one of the full-size ones. If it doesn't already have one, you can also pop one of the buds in off on its own. You don't necessarily have to put it right side a full-size one. And my last ranunculus, I'm going to work into my design anywhere where I either have open space or just don't already have a ranunculus. So for me, that's the back side. I have no ranunculus yet, so I popped him in right here. Okay. So our last and final element is our umbrella fern. So usually I would say that our umbrella fern are not quite this large. So this is a really big umbrella fern. Normally I would say you can just add in like half of the umbrella fern on one side of your design and half on the other side. With these guys, we can honestly break all of these arms off and use them separately. So they're really long. So we can get away with just breaking all of the individual arms and then using them. If you have one that's like a V shape like this, you can leave that together. But for the rest of these, they're just so big that I can get away with using them on their own. And I'm going to strip away about half of the low wide leaves so that I have a clean stem to work into my design. So beginning by just breaking off all the little fronds themselves and then stripping away the bottom portion of the leaves. So we've broken this up into many smaller ones. So you can kind of just use these to fill in any remaining holes that you might have. So my recommendation would be to just kind of thread these guys in. They're very delicate. They have a really thin stem, so just be careful as you're threading them in. But they can kind of just wisp out of the top of your design, out of the sides of your design, anywhere where you want to just add a little bit of extra flair. You don't even need to add in all of them. Feel free to leave some out if you feel like you have too many fronds, since we broke them all up. I think it will look nice to have some fronds together. So even though we broke them into two pieces or all individual pieces, you can tuck two into like the same area of your design so that it looks like it almost is growing alongside that one. So I've got some high, some low. Don't feel like you need to neglect the bottom of your arrangement. So I usually like to go and get head on with my design and take a look at it from directly head on so that I can see if someone's sitting next to this arrangement, are there any holes or open spaces where I've neglected or that have been neglected as I added stuff in. And then you can kind of just pop these beautiful fronds in. They are really subtle because they're so thin and delicate. So I'm actually just gonna go ahead and add all of these little fronds in. I think they're so fun and pretty. Yeah. All right. Beautiful. So you can play with it. You can put one in, decide you hated that spot, and then remove it and put it in somewhere else. But with that, we have a beautiful, complete monochromatic orange design. I hope that you guys enjoyed this class. In order to make sure that your arrangement looks beautiful and healthy through the weekend and beyond, just make sure that you add water to your arrangement. So you're going to want to, either using a turkey baster or a measuring cup, add about half a cup of water to your arrangement every day. So your flowers are thirsty as is, but it's really hot outside. Lots of sunlight pouring into our homes, so your flowers are going to be even thirstier. So just make sure that you're pouring water back into the arrangement as your flowers drink it each day. And then you're going to want to make sure that it's out of direct sunlight. So it can certainly be in a room like this where you're getting sunlight, but just not sitting in a windowsill or somewhere where the sunlight is pouring onto your arrangement and just cooking the flowers entirely. Other than that, thank you so much for joining this class today. We are so excited to support this particular cause, and hopefully we will do more fundraising in the future with other classes. If you're enjoying this class and you're interested in taking more classes with us, we do offer, generally speaking, it's a weekly class. Typically it's on Wednesdays and then sometimes on Thursdays, but we just uploaded all of our classes through the end of the year. So there's quite a bit of selection up there. Classes centered around a certain color palette. vocal flowers, holidays. So we have a Thanksgiving class, we have a Christmas mantle class, I believe. Sometimes we have wreath making classes, so there's a ton of variety up there. If you're interested in doing stuff beyond just arranging flowers, there's tons of stuff for every different holiday and style or design. So check that out. All the registration information is on our website. If you choose to join us for the live version of this class, it is the 20th at 7 p.m. on Instagram Live. Helen Olivia Flowers is that Instagram channel. And we will see you again in class soon.